London, July 1887. The kind of summer that felt heavy enough to press the breath out of your lungs. Mrs. Adelaide Whitmore sat alone in the waiting room of Dr. Edmund Carter's private clinic, her gloves still on despite the heat, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that the leather creaked. She looked like a woman who had forgotten how to rest, how to exhale, how to feel anything except the strange electric hum beneath her skin. The gas lamp above her flickered, throwing restless shadows across the mahogany walls. Every time it dimmed, her heart lurched, too fast, too hard, like it feared the dark. Adelaide wasn't new here. This was her 4th visit in 5 weeks, but shame, for reasons she couldn't name, always arrived before she did. Her symptoms had begun in late May, almost imperceptibly. A few sleepless nights. A growing irritability that sharpened her voice until even her servants avoided her footsteps. The trembling in her hands when she lifted her teacup. The tightness in her chest that made breathing feel like something she had to consciously command. And then the moment that changed everything. June 2nd, 1887, the Caraway Estate Ball. A night she should have remembered for music, champagne, and polite gossip. Instead, it ended with her husband escorting her out of the drawing room as she clutched his sleeve, barely able to stand. Her body had betrayed her, violently, publicly. 2 physicians before Dr. Carter had called it nervous exhaustion. One recommended bed rest, the other prescribed herbal tonics that tasted like metal and left her feeling nothing at all. But Dr. Carter, he was different. You saw it the moment he spoke. The certainty, the authority, the quiet conviction of a man who believed he understood women better than they understood themselves. When she first described her symptoms, he didn't brush them away. He leaned forward, pen poised, listening with such intensity that she felt stripped bare by his attention alone. And then he said the word: hysteria. It hung between them like a verdict, a diagnosis so common for Victorian women that it required no explanation. And yet, the way he said it, as though he had discovered something hidden deep within her, made her feel exposed, defined, categorized. The female system, he told her, is extraordinarily delicate. When certain natural functions are disrupted, the entire body rebels. She didn't understand what he meant. Not completely. He didn't explain. Not completely. But he spoke with such calm, such authority, that she accepted it. Or perhaps she simply lacked the strength to challenge him. Now, as she sat in the waiting room for her next appointment, she felt the same creeping dread she felt each time he examined her. A dread she could not explain. A dread she couldn't voice. The kind that lived behind locked doors in the mind. Her chest tightened. Her gloves felt too tight. Her vision narrowed until the world around her blurred. The clock on the wall tolled softly. 10 in the morning, her appointment time. Dr. Carter appeared in the doorway, his expression a perfect mask of professional calm. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "I'm ready for you." Her pulse quickened, not with anticipation, not with fear, with something far more complicated, a confusion so deep, it felt dangerous. She rose. Her feet moved without her mind's permission. She followed him, past the shelves of leather-bound journals, past the framed certificates from Edinburgh and Paris, past the heavy door that always clicked shut behind her like a lock ceiling. His office smelled faintly of lavender and something colder underneath. He invited her to sit. She did. He reviewed his notes, pages filled with observations written in precise clinical strokes. "Your symptoms," he said, are progressing. But that is not unusual. Treatment, when began in the early stages, is highly effective. Today we will continue. Her stomach tightened. She did not want to continue. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to say the words. "Doctor," she whispered, "is this truly necessary?" He turned his gaze toward her, his face softening with the perfect degree of concern, the kind that made resistance feel foolish. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said gently, "all your discomfort, all your distress can be resolved. You only need to trust me." Trust, such a small word, such a dangerous one. Something inside her curled inward, bracing, but she nodded, because that was what women were expected to do. In 1887, in London, in a society where a woman's body was something she did not own, not fully, not legally, not medically. Dr. Carter stood. "As before," he said, "I ask that you prepare yourself." She stepped behind the folding screen. Her hands shook as she unbuttoned her dress. Her breath came shallow and unsteady. The screen shielded her from view, but not from him, never from him. And as the familiar feeling of dread slid through her, she knew, even without understanding, that something about this treatment felt wrong, deeply wrong. But she also knew something else. Victorian medicine had a way of turning a woman's silence into compliance, and compliance into tragedy. Adelaide stepped out from behind the screen, and history stepped with her. London, July 1887, 10:14 a.m. Adelaide lay on the leather examination table, the sheet drawn up to her collarbones, the rest of her hidden from sight. The ceiling above her was stained with the faint yellowing halos of old gaslight smoke, like ghosts of previous patients who had stared up at the same cracked plaster and thought the same unspoken questions. How did I get here? Why does this feel wrong? And why does part of me feel relief? Dr. Carter spoke in that calm, measured tone she'd come to associate with him. "Remember, Mrs. Whitmore," he said, arranging his instruments with quiet efficiency. "These episodes you experience are not a moral failing. They are simply an excess of nervous energy, a congestion. Once relieved, your symptoms improve. We have seen this already, have we not?" She swallowed. Yes, that was the worst part. After each visit, the tightness in her chest really did loosen. The shaking in her hands quieted. She slept, finally, without jolting awake at every creak of the floorboards. It worked. That made it harder to question, harder to say no. "I only want my life back," she whispered. He gave a small, sympathetic smile, the kind you might offer a frightened child. "And that," he replied, "is precisely what we are doing, restoring you to yourself." He drew the screen closer, blocking her view of his hands. Only the corner of his sleeve remained visible, the white of his cuff, the glint of a watch chain. The room fell into a hush, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock on the wall and the distant rattle of carriage wheels outside. "Breathe steadily," he instructed. "If you feel intensity, do not fight it. That is simply the nerves discharging. Intensity." What a small word for what she felt. She closed her eyes. Her heart raced. At first, it was simply discomfort, a strange intrusiveness, a sense that something was happening to her rather than with her. She focused on the ceiling, on the crack that ran like a river from the lamp to the corner of the room. She tried to imagine she was elsewhere, the drawing room at home, the sound of her husband rustling the newspaper, the clink of porcelain at afternoon tea. But the room kept pulling her back. Her own body kept pulling her back. That familiar build of pressure, terrifying and relieving in equal measure, rose like a tide she couldn't command. Her breath quickened. Her fingers dug into the sides of the table. She did not dare speak. Respectable women did not speak of such things, and certainly did not react to them. "Good," Dr. Carter murmured somewhere beyond the sheet, his voice still clinical, still detached. "The nervous system is responding. Almost there." The words barely made sense, but the tone did. He sounded satisfied, pleased with his work, pleased with her response. And then it happened. A sudden, overwhelming wave of sensation crashed through her, not gentle, not soft, but sharp, bright, blinding. Her muscles tensed, then released. For a heartbeat, for 3, she wasn't in the room at all. She was nowhere and everywhere, suspended between shame and relief. When the moment passed, it left her emptied and trembling, tears standing in her eyes. She didn't know why she was crying. "Excellent," he said, as though he had just measured her heartbeat or examined her lungs. She heard the scratch of his pen against paper. A clear paroxysm, marked. "You should find yourself calmer for several days." Calmer. Yes. But what word was there for the rest of it? Humiliation, confusion, a strange, guilty gratitude she didn't want to feel. "Twice weekly," he continued, "remains ideal. Given the severity of your case, I would not recommend interrupting the course of treatment. To do so might provoke a relapse, and neither of us wants that. Neither of us." He said it like they were partners in this, as if she had truly agreed. Adelaide's voice came out thin. "Doctor, is this what you do with all your women patients?" He paused for the briefest moment. Then, "With those who require it, yes." "Do they?" She faltered, unable to form the word. "Feel, react, cry. Do they improve?" He smiled again, a small, professional curve of the mouth. "My dear, if they did not, I should be out of business." He helped her sit up, turned politely away as she adjusted the sheet. She moved back behind the screen, her legs unsteady beneath her. As she dressed, her mind spun. If this is wrong, why does it help? If this is right, why do I feel like I can't tell anyone? When she stepped back into the office, hat pinned, gloves on, face composed, he handed her a small card. "Next Thursday, 10 in the morning," he said. "One must be consistent with nerves. They are like unruly children. They respond best to routine." She nodded and took the card. The appointment was written in ink. Her consent felt written in pencil. As she stepped out into the hot London street, the city's noise swallowed her. Carriage wheels, vendors shouting, the distant call of a newsboy hawking papers about politics that would never concern her. No one looking at her would know that, 10 minutes earlier, a man with a medical license had coaxed her body into an involuntary storm and then called it science. No one would suspect that what she had just experienced wasn't some strange personal failing, but part of a vast, well-oiled system. A system that told women, "You are broken. We will fix you. You don't need to understand how." If you're listening to this right now, somewhere in 2025, maybe in your car, maybe in bed with the lights off, ask yourself, how many Adelaides were there? Because her story wasn't an exception. It was practically a template. Between the late 1700s and the early 1900s, doctors across Europe and America were doing exactly what Dr. Carter did, over and over again, to women whose names never made it into history books. And it all began with one simple, catastrophic idea: that the problem was never the society that suffocated women. It was their bodies. Centuries before Adelaide sat in that waiting room, men in long robes and laurel wreaths were already convinced They understood women better than women understood themselves. Around 400 BCE, the Greek physician Hippocrates, the man later generations would call the father of medicine, examined women with panic, seizures, and mysterious pains, and gave their suffering a name: hysteria, the uterus. He imagined the womb as something almost alive in its own right, sensitive, restless, temperamental. In his writings, he described it as an organ that could wander through the body if it wasn't kept satisfied by marriage and childbirth. A woman remained unmarried too long, her womb might rise, pressing against her heart, making her gasp and faint. She went too long without pregnancy, her womb might descend, weighing on her limbs, making them weak. To us, it sounds surreal. To him, it sounded like logic. By the 4th century BCE, the philosopher Plato pushed the image even further. He described the uterus as a living creature, an animal within an animal, that punished a woman's body if she defied her natural purpose. The cure seemed obvious to them: marriage, sex, pregnancy. Not because women might want any of those things, but because their organs supposedly demanded it. And here's the crucial thing: no one asked women what they actually felt. They simply wrote their experiences into textbooks, without ever giving them a voice. By the Renaissance, when European physicians finally began dissecting female bodies more carefully, they discovered something inconvenient. The uterus did not wander. It did not climb up toward the lungs or slide down to the knees. It stayed in place, anchored by ligaments like any other organ. The theory was wrong, but instead of abandoning the idea that women's suffering came from some mysterious inner defect, medicine did something far more dangerous. It kept the diagnosis and changed the justification. If the womb didn't physically travel, then it must simply exert a powerful, invisible influence over the rest of the body. A kind of internal tyrant pulling invisible strings. By the time Queen Victoria took the throne in 1837, hysteria had become a bottomless box. Almost anything a woman might feel could be shoved inside and labeled: trembling hands, hysteria, insomnia, hysteria, panic before a dinner party, hysteria, anger at her husband, definitely hysteria, depression after childbirth, hysteria again. It wasn't a disease, it was a judgment, a way for the culture to insist: if you're unhappy in the life we gave you, the problem must be in your nerves, not in the world. In 1857, an influential English doctor named William Acton wrote with absolute confidence that most women are not troubled with sexual feeling of any kind. Let that sink in. He didn't say, "We don't know much about female desire." He didn't say, "We may be missing something." He declared that respectable women simply didn't feel it, which created a twisted equation. If a woman wanted intimacy, she was suspicious, immoral, or ill. If she didn't want it, she was normal. But if that lack of desire made her tense, depressed, or restless, hysteria. No matter which path she took, the diagnosis was waiting. And that's where men like Dr. Carter came in. Confident, educated, absolutely certain that the problem lived inside the woman's body, and just as certain that they alone knew how to fix it. When Mrs. Adelaide Whitmore stepped back into the sunlit chaos of London, she felt like someone had quietly switched her life with a version that looked the same on the outside, but hummed with a secret she could neither explain nor escape. Her street, her home, her husband's calm morning routine, all of it felt distant, as if her life continued without her while she remained trapped somewhere between dread and relief, guilt and necessity. For the next several days, her symptoms softened, exactly as Dr. Carter predicted. The trembling waned. Her breath flowed easier. Even the nights became more bearable. But something else began growing in the quiet moments. A tension behind her ribs. A strange anticipation she hated herself for feeling. Every time she caught herself glancing at the appointment card, she felt a flush of shame rise to her cheeks. July 12, 1887. The night before her next visit. She found herself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, counting her heartbeats. She didn't want to return, but she also wasn't sure she could bear not returning. Victorian women were taught not to question men, husbands, doctors, clergymen, and certainly not the men who claimed to understand their bodies better than they did. And yet, something in her was beginning to resist, quietly, carefully, like the first crack in a dam. "Perhaps I'm simply overwrought," she whispered into the darkness, hoping the words might make it true. Doctors know best. But she remembered the look on Dr. Carter's face, that subtle, focused satisfaction as he worked. A look she had tried to dismiss. She turned over and tried to sleep. She didn't. When the next appointment came, she convinced herself it was merely compliance, not desire, not expectation. She reminded herself that this was treatment, science, medicine, not something a woman of her class should question. July 13th, 1887, 10 in the morning. The waiting room looked the same. The shadows danced the same way. Her hands twitched the same faint tremor. But there was one difference. She noticed another woman leaving the office as she arrived. A woman she recognized. Mrs. Eleanor Price, polished, poised, married to a banker, and known for her impeccable composure at every social function. Yet when their eyes met, Eleanor looked shaken. Not visibly, not enough for scandal, but enough for Adelaide to see something raw flickering beneath the surface, a crack in the facade. "Mrs. Whitmore," Eleanor murmured, forcing a polite smile as she passed. "A pleasure as always." But the smile didn't reach her eyes. Her hands trembled in her gloves. And for the first time, Adelaide realized she wasn't the only one. The thought jolted her, not with relief, but with a deep, hollow dread. How many women walked through this door each week, each month? Doctors spoke of hysteria as if it were a plague unique to femininity. But Adelaide now wondered, was it sickness, or was it something society had forced into them? Before she could follow that thought any further, Dr. Carter stepped into the doorway. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said with a polite tilt of his head. "Come in." His tone was exactly the same as always, calm, professional, confident, the tone of a man who never expected to be questioned. She followed him in. His office smelled of lavender and something metallic beneath it. Maybe the scent of polished tools or medical oils. The shade over the window filtered the light into a soft haze, making the room feel suspended between day and night. "Your symptoms have improved?" he asked. "In some ways," she admitted. "And in others?" She hesitated. "I feel unsettled," she said finally. "Not physically, just here." She touched her sternum. He nodded, writing. "That is common. The nerves do not relinquish their unrest easily. But you are healing." Healing. Another small word carrying far too much weight. Behind him, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A ledger on the side table, slightly open. Names written in tidy handwriting, dozens of them. Women she knew. Women she had dined with. Women who smiled in public, laughed politely, danced with their husbands, managed their households. All of them here. All of them being treated for the same condition. A quiet, chilling truth settled over her. This wasn't a rare affliction. This was a ritual disguised as medicine. Dr. Carter gestured toward the screen. "Shall we begin?" he asked. The question wasn't really a question. Her heart pounded. Something inside her screamed to refuse, to run, to demand answers. But her voice, that obedient Victorian voice that had been trained since girlhood to comply, stepped forward instead. "Yes, doctor," she said softly. She stepped behind the screen. Her hands trembled as she unbuttoned her blouse. Every movement felt slow, heavy, deliberate. She wanted to scream. She wanted to disappear. But she kept going, because she didn't know how not to. The treatment passed as it always did. Clinical, contained, controlled. No warmth, no humanity. Just the steady rhythm of a practiced hand and the soft, cold voice of a man who believed he was performing a medical necessity. When the overwhelming wave finally passed, leaving her trembling and breathless, he spoke without looking up. "A very clear and healthy release today. Not to worry. This is all part of the nervous system's natural response. You are progressing well." Progressing. Another word that sounded like praise and felt like defeat. She swallowed hard, blinking back the sting in her eyes. When she dressed and stepped into the main office, Dr. Carter handed her another appointment card. "Next Tuesday," he said. "Same time." Then he took her hand, just briefly, as though sealing a contract. "You must trust me," he added. "You are in very capable hands." His touch lingered a moment too long. Her entire body tensed, and the truth hit her like a blow. She didn't trust him. Not anymore. Not at all. But she nodded anyway. Because that was what women were expected to do. As she walked out of the clinic, the city spinning around her, a single thought haunted her more than the treatment itself. If so many women needed this, then maybe the sickness wasn't in them. Maybe it was in the world that trapped them. And somewhere, buried beneath layers of duty, decorum, and silent fear, something inside her began to wake. Something dangerous, something powerful, something she had never been allowed to name. July 13th, 1887, 11:07 a.m. Adelaide didn't walk home. She drifted, through the crowded pavements, past the shouting newspaper boys, past the carriages splashing through muddy intersections. All of it blurred into a faint echo, like she were moving underwater. Her body felt numb, but her mind was painfully awake, flickering with thoughts she had never dared to think before. What if this treatment wasn't medicine? What if this wasn't healing, but something else entirely? And worst of all, why did so many women, respectable women, intelligent women, return week after week? The question gnawed at her until she reached home. Her husband, Thomas, sat in the drawing room, legs crossed, reading the Times. The moment she stepped inside, he glanced up with mild curiosity. "You're back early," he said. He didn't rise. He rarely did. "The doctor saw me promptly," she replied, removing her gloves carefully so he wouldn't notice her trembling hands. "Good, good." He turned the page. "I do hope you begin feeling more like yourself soon. These nerves of yours. I suppose it's the strain of the season." Strain. Another small word used to gloss over entire worlds of female suffering. "Yes," she murmured. "Perhaps." Thomas looked over the paper again, studying her with the same detached concern one might offer a wilting plant. "You're not overexerting yourself, are you?" She almost laughed. If only he knew. "No," she said. "I'm resting." "Excellent. Dr. Carter is highly respected. We're lucky he accepted you so quickly." Her stomach twisted. He didn't ask what the treatment entailed. He never had. That was the unspoken rule of Victorian marriage. Husbands didn't ask, wives didn't tell, and everyone pretended life made perfect sense. "I trust he knows what he's doing," Thomas added cluelessly. Adelaide froze at the words. For the first time, she questioned whether men like him, men who believed women's emotions were inconveniences, not experiences, even wanted to know the truth. Maybe their ignorance wasn't accidental. Maybe it was convenient. That evening, she sat alone at her vanity, brushing her hair absently, staring into the mirror. The woman reflected back at her didn't look ill. She looked haunted. What would happen if she simply stopped going? If she told Dr. Carter no? If she told her husband, or her friends, or anyone? Her heart tightened at the thought. She could already hear their responses. "Adelaide, don't be dramatic. It's a medical treatment. Nothing more. You mustn't let your imagination run wild." Women's complaints always fell into one of two categories. Either they were ignored, or they were diagnosed, never believed. As she stared at her reflection, the truth settled over her like a cold cloth. She wasn't sick, not in the way they claimed. Something else was happening. Something she wasn't allowed to articulate, and that realization terrified her more than the treatment itself. July 17th, 1887, luncheon at Lady Winthrop's estate. The room sparkled with chandeliers and the metallic clink of cutlery. Women in pastel dresses gathered around small tables, fanning themselves and whispering behind gloved hands. Adelaide noticed Eleanor Price, the woman she'd seen leaving the clinic, sitting alone on a chaise. Her posture stiff, her expression polished but strained. Their eyes met. A flicker of recognition passed between them. Without quite knowing why, Adelaide crossed the room. "Mrs. Price," she greeted softly. Eleanor's smile was brittle. "Mrs. Whitmore, may I join you?" "Of course." They sat. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Adelaide said in a low voice, "I saw you at Dr. Carter's." Eleanor's fan faltered, just slightly, but enough. A rush of understanding passed between them, silent, forbidden, undeniable. Eleanor swallowed. "I assumed you wouldn't mention it." "And I assumed," Adelaide said, "you wouldn't either." Another pause. Then Eleanor whispered, "Does he help you?" Adelaide hesitated. The truthful answer was far too complicated. "I suppose he relieves the symptoms," she said cautiously. Eleanor exhaled with something like relief or resignation. "Yes," she murmured. "That's what he tells me as well." Something in her tone made Adelaide's heart twist. Not relief, not gratitude. Something closer to dread. Eleanor's eyes drifted toward the window, unfocused. "My husband believes it's my nerves," she continued. "The doctor insists it's hysteria, but sometimes..." She swallowed again. "Sometimes I think the treatment causes more harm than whatever I went in for." Adelaide stared at her. It was the first time another woman, any woman, had dared to say it aloud. And suddenly, Adelaide felt less alone, less helpless, less trapped in the silent machinery of Victorian medicine. She leaned closer. "Eleanor," she whispered, "what does he actually do to you?" The question hung between them like a blade. Eleanor's chest rose and fell. Her eyes filled with tears, she quickly blinked away. "I cannot say," she whispered, "but you already know." Adelaide froze. Because yes, she did. Not the details, not the language, but the truth behind the silence. And that truth was beginning to grow into something huge, dark, and undeniable. Before either woman could speak again, Lady Winthrop's laughter pealed across the room, and the moment shattered like fragile glass. Eleanor regained her composure instantly, straightening her spine, lifting her fan. "Please," she whispered, "don't speak of this again. Not here, not with anyone." Adelaide nodded, but inside her something had begun to shift. Something irreversible, something frightening, something like awakening. That night, Adelaide lay awake long after the city settled into restless sleep. Her mind replayed Eleanor's trembling voice, her haunted eyes, her whispered admission, and then a thought struck her with the force of lightning. If all these women are being treated for hysteria, then perhaps hysteria was never a disease at all. Perhaps it was a cage, a category created to control, a convenient way to silence women who felt too much, questioned too much, suffered too much under the weight of expectations that no human could bear. And the doctors, with their instruments and their confidence and their absolute certainty, were simply another part of the machinery. A machinery that took women's pain and repackaged it as their fault. A machinery that called obedience health, silence modesty, and submission science. Something inside Adelaide ignited, something she had never felt before. Not rebellion exactly, not yet, but recognition. And recognition in a world built on denial was the first unforgivable sin. July 18th, 1887, 6:45 a.m. Adelaide woke long before sunrise, not because of trembling hands, not because of a tightness in her chest, not because of fear. She woke because of anger, a quiet anger, not yet sharp enough to burn, but steady, settled, undeniable, like embers beneath ashes. She rose from bed without waking Thomas and stepped onto the balcony overlooking their small garden. London was still half asleep, chimneys silent, the sky turning pink at the edges. It was the first moment in weeks she felt like she could breathe without being monitored, without being measured, without being examined. Her thoughts drifted back to Eleanor Price, her pale face, the tremble in her voice, the way she whispered, "I think the treatment causes more harm." The thought clung to Adelaide like a shadow, because if Eleanor, graceful, composed, perfectly mannered Eleanor, felt the same dread, then the issue wasn't in Adelaide's imagination. Something was wrong, not with her, not with them, but with him, with the treatment, with the system, with the entire idea of hysteria. That afternoon, a stack of correspondence arrived from friends and acquaintances. Invitations to teas, to soirees, to a charity lecture on the fragility of the female nervous system. She read that last title twice, her jaw clenching. Fragility. Another word men like to use when describing women who had simply run out of breath from living inside a world that refused to let them speak. She turned the envelope over and over in her hands. The lecturer, according to the embossed card, was a visiting physician from Vienna, a colleague of Sigmund Freud. The name meant little to Adelaide then, though years later the world would never forget it. But something about the topic pulled her, like a thread she didn't know she'd been tugging at. Maybe someone else was beginning to question the old ways. Maybe medicine was shifting. Maybe for once, a man of science might say something true. She decided she would attend. July 21st, 1887, the Royal Society Hall, the lecture room buzzed with women in lace gloves and feathered hats, husbands standing rigidly beside them as though they feared their wives might faint at the mention of medical terms. Adelaide sat in the back, partially hidden by a pillar, her hands folded in her lap. The lecturer stepped onto the stage, a tall, thin man with an angular beard and tired eyes. His voice was low and accented, but steady. "The condition known as hysteria," he began, "has been greatly misunderstood." A murmur rustled through the room. Adelaide leaned forward. The doctor adjusted his spectacles. "For centuries," he continued, "we believed the female body itself was the origin of the illness, that the womb, the hystera, exerted a mysterious, destabilizing influence." More murmurs. Several husbands shifted uncomfortably. "But recent studies suggest," he said, choosing his words carefully, "that the cause may not be physical at all." Adelaide's breath caught. He went on, "What we call hysteria may in fact be rooted in emotional distress, in unspoken grief, in repression, in the strain of living within social confines so strict that many women cannot express their true thoughts or desires." Silence fell over the room. Not polite silence, shocked silence. The men looked offended. The women looked seen. A flush crept up Adelaide's neck. This stranger from Vienna had described her life without ever meeting her. He had described Eleanor's life, Lady Winthrop's life, the lives of every woman in the room. Then he said something she would remember for decades. "Perhaps it is not the female body that is sick. Perhaps it is the world she must survive within." The words hit Adelaide with the force of truth, bright, blinding, undeniable. She felt her pulse quicken, not with anxiety, but with recognition, with clarity. A clarity she hadn't felt in months. The lecturer closed with caution, aware of the murmuring uproar his claims would cause. "I do not expect the medical establishment to accept this immediately. Ideas embedded for centuries do not fall in a day. But I urge you, consider that the diagnosis of hysteria says more about society's view of women than about women themselves." Thunderous applause came only from the women. The men remained stiff, offended, bristling, and Adelaide, for the first time since her symptoms began, felt something close to hope. After the lecture, she stepped outside onto the stone steps, the evening breeze cool against her flushed skin. She wasn't alone. Eleanor Price stood there too, arms wrapped around herself, staring out at the carriage lamps flickering against the dusk. Adelaide approached gently. "You heard him," she said. Eleanor nodded slowly. "Yes. Do you agree?" Eleanor swallowed. "I don't know," she whispered. "But whatever is happening in those clinics, whatever is happening to women like us, it feels wrong. And yet..." She broke off, glancing around nervously. "And yet I keep going back. Because if I stop, I don't know what will happen to me." Adelaide's chest tightened. This was the trap, the cruel paradox. The treatment felt terrifying. The absence of treatment felt worse. A dependency created by ignorance, shame, and a culture that refused to name the real cause of women's suffering. Adelaide placed a hand gently on Eleanor's arm. "We are not mad," she whispered. "We are not weak. Something is being done to us, Eleanor. Something we didn't consent to. Something we weren't told to understand." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I know," she whispered. "But what can we possibly do?" The question hung between them, impossible and enormous. What could two women without rights, without voices, without agency, do against an entire medical system built on their silence? Adelaide didn't know, not yet. But she felt something ignite inside her, a spark, a beginning. Perhaps women couldn't dismantle the system, but they could stop pretending not to see it. And in a world built on denial, seeing was the first act of rebellion. July 23, 1887, A quiet dread settling in the bones, the morning of her next appointment arrived with a peculiar heaviness. Not fear exactly, not anymore. Something colder. Sharper, more alert. Adelaide dressed slowly, fastening each button of her blouse with deliberate precision. Her fingers felt foreign on the fabric, as though she were dressing someone else. Thomas kissed her cheek absent-mindedly before leaving for his office. The same ritual as always. He didn't notice how pale she was, or how she flinched when he touched her arm, or how she lingered in the doorway long after he left. He never noticed these things. Victorian husbands weren't expected to, and maybe that was the entire problem. 10 a.m., Carter's clinic. When she arrived, the waiting room was fuller than usual. 3 women sat with their hands clasped, their faces tight with unspoken dread. One dabbed her temple with a handkerchief. Another stared at the floor like it held a truth she refused to look at directly. The third woman, someone Adelaide recognized from a tea party at Mrs. Pembroke's, kept adjusting her gloves as if bracing for punishment. Something cold slithered down Adelaide's spine. There were too many of them. Too many suffering in silence. Too many returning. Why? Dr. Carter appeared, as always, with perfect timing. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said warmly, "right on schedule." But this time, for the first time, she didn't rise immediately. She looked at the other women. They looked away. All except one. The woman from Mrs. Pembroke's tea party lifted her gaze, eyes flickering with a silent warning. "Don't fight him. Don't question him. Don't make this harder." Adelaide stood, but her heart was ice. Inside the office, everything was exactly as before. The lavender scent, the lined-up instruments, the neatly organized shelves. A room designed for calmness, for control, for compliance. But today, Adelaide saw something new. A second ledger. Not the one listing appointments. A different one. Thicker, older, locked with a small brass clasp. It sat half-hidden beneath papers on Carter's desk. And on the exposed corner, she saw a name. Mrs. E. Price, June 14th, June 21st, June 28th, July 5th. Eleanor. Her breath caught. Not because of the dates, but because Eleanor had never mentioned starting treatment that early. And judging by her trembling, she had been going far longer than she admitted. Dr. Carter noticed Adelaide staring. He followed her gaze, and with an almost imperceptible motion, he slid a stack of folders over the ledger. Her skin prickled. A doctor hiding his notes? The thought shouldn't have been suspicious, but it was. Deeply. "Shall we begin?" he asked, his voice perfectly smooth. She forced a nod, yet something in her posture shifted. Her shoulders no longer relaxed. Her chin lifted slightly. Her eyes narrowed just enough to register defiance. She stepped behind the screen, but her mind spun with new, unwelcome truths. How many women were in that ledger? How many pages did their suffering fill? And why did the book require a lock? When she emerged in the treatment sheet, he motioned for her to lie down. But before she did, she asked, "Doctor, do you write about me? In those notebooks?" His expression flickered, not with guilt, not with alarm, but with irritation, only for a heartbeat. Then he smiled. "Of course," he said lightly. "Detailed clinical records are essential for tracking progress." "But why locked?" she pressed. His fingers paused over his instruments. "Medical confidentiality," he said. "I cannot risk personal notes being read by unauthorized eyes, not even by patients themselves." The answer was rational, reasonable, completely plausible. And yet, it wasn't. Because the way he said it, quiet, controlled, felt like a door closing. A door she had not been invited to open. The treatment proceeded. Her body reacted as it always did. The sensation rose. Her breath quickened. The wave crashed. But this time, something was different. Adelaide didn't let her mind go blank. She stayed conscious, present, watching every movement, every word, every shift of his tone. She analyzed him the way he analyzed her. And when it was over, when she was still trembling and breathless, he made a note in his ledger. Whitmore, strong response. Duration, 72 seconds. Recovery, immediate. Her heart stopped. He hadn't even waited for her to leave the table. She whispered, shaken, "You measure it?" He didn't look up. Of course. Scientific progress requires precision. Now please dress. We must schedule next week. She stood behind the screen, her hands trembling, but this time not from nervous exhaustion, from realization. She had thought she was a patient, a woman seeking relief, a soul caught in the machinery of Victorian medicine. But the truth was infinitely more disturbing. She was data, a body measured, a chapter in his private study of women's responses. Not hysteria, not nerves, not medicine. A research subject. When she dressed and returned to the office, he handed her the familiar card. Next Thursday, Mrs. Whitmore, 10 in the morning. She took it with stiff fingers. But then, before she could stop herself, she asked, "What happens to women when the treatment ends?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "When they stop coming, when they feel better, when they're finished." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "They rarely stop," he said simply. "Why?" "Because hysteria never truly disappears. It merely sleeps." A chill ran through her. "And Eleanor Price?" she asked. "How long has she been coming?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was the answer. Adelaide walked out of the clinic with a single terrifying truth burning in her mind. Women aren't healing. They're being managed, sustained, kept returning, kept dependent. Not because their bodies demanded it, but because a male-dominated medical system had decided it was so. She realized then that she wasn't sick. She had never been sick. She had been conditioned. And Dr. Carter, with his lavender-scented office and locked ledgers and carefully measured treatments, was not a healer. He was the keeper of a cage built not of iron, but of ignorance and authority. And Adelaide, trembling, breathing hard, her gloves damp with sweat, finally saw the bars. July 24th, 1887, the day after everything changed. Adelaide didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed beside her husband, eyes wide open in the dark, listening to his steady breathing, so calm, so undisturbed, while her own heart pounded against her ribs like it wanted out. For the first time since her symptoms began, she felt no relief after the treatment, only dread. Because now she knew one thing with terrifying clarity. She wasn't a patient. She was a specimen, a data point, a line in a ledger she wasn't meant to see. By morning, the dread had sharpened into a cold determination. She needed answers, not from gossip, not from pamphlets, not from men in lecture halls, from the women themselves. July 24th, 1887, 2:15 p.m. The Pembroke Tea Gathering. Mrs. Pembroke was known for two things: her immaculate taste in biscuits and her obsession with appearances. Her parlor was filled with pastel carpets and porcelain figurines, fragile things meant only to be looked at. Much like the women who frequented her gatherings, Adelaide arrived late enough to avoid the formalities, but early enough to blend into the idle chatter. She scanned the room until she found her target. Mrs. Clarissa Davenport. Elegant, always serene, a woman whose calmness seemed unnatural, forced even. Clarissa had been in Dr. Carter's waiting room the first time Adelaide ever visited. She remembered the way Clarissa's pupils dilated when Carter called her name. Not fear exactly, more like resignation or dependency. Adelaide approached her carefully. "Clarissa," she said softly, "may we speak?" Clarissa blinked, slowly, as if waking from a dream she hadn't known she was having. "Of course, dear. Sit." They settled onto a velvet sofa away from the room's center, where the noise was a comfortable cover. Adelaide lowered her voice. "I wanted to ask about Dr. Carter." The teacup in Clarissa's hand rattled against its saucer, very faint, but unmistakable, a reaction. "I'm not sure what you mean," Clarissa whispered, glancing toward the other women. "I think you do," Adelaide replied, "and I think you've been going there longer than any of us." Clarissa's eyes widened, panic flashing across them before she smoothed her expression into practiced politeness. "Why would you assume such a thing?" she asked too quickly. Adelaide leaned in. "Because I saw your initials in his ledger, page after page." Clarissa froze. Her smile collapsed, replaced by something raw, something terrified. She set her teacup down with trembling fingers. "Adelaide, you shouldn't have seen that." "Why not?" Clarissa swallowed. "Because knowing too much only makes it worse." Adelaide's pulse raced. "Clarissa," she whispered, "how long have you been seeing him?" Clarissa pressed a hand to her stomach as though bracing for pain. 3 years. Adelaide felt her breath catch. 3 years? But your husband never questioned. Men only question when it inconveniences them, Clarissa said bitterly. A wave of emotion rolled across her face. Shame, exhaustion, fear. "Every time I tried to stop," Clarissa continued, voice trembling, "the symptoms returned. Worse. The doctor said I needed consistency, and after a time, I couldn't tell where the illness ended and the treatment began." Her breathing grew shallow. "He writes everything down, Adelaide. Everything. Not just our responses, our behavior, our moods, the smallest details. He keeps track of how often we come, how quickly we improve, when we resist." Adelaide felt ice water flow through her veins. "When we resist," she repeated. Clarissa's eyes darted around the room as if the wallpaper might be listening. "He doesn't handle resistance well," she whispered. "Women who refuse the treatment, they simply stop appearing in the ledger." Adelaide's pulse thundered. "What happens to them?" Clarissa shook her head. "I don't know, but they don't return to society, not the ones I knew. They vanish from teas, dinners, charity events. Their husbands say they're visiting family in the country, but no one ever sees them again." Adelaide's stomach churned. "Do you believe that?" she whispered. Clarissa's voice dropped to a tremor. "I believe they disappear." Before Adelaide could respond, Mrs. Pembroke's bright voice pierced the room. "Ladies, biscuits are served!" The conversation shattered. Clarissa instantly straightened, smoothing her skirt, restoring her social mask, the perfect Victorian woman once more. But under the lace and pearls, she was shaking. As Adelaide rose from the sofa, Clarissa grasped her wrist, fingers icy. "Listen to me," she whispered urgently. "Don't confront him. Don't draw attention. And if you value your safety and your sanity, don't you dare stop going." Adelaide stared at her, frozen, confused, horrified. "But why would stopping be dangerous?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Clarissa leaned close, her grip tightening. Because, Adelaide, once he's decided you're sick, he never lets you leave his care. A chill ran down Adelaide's spine so violently she almost gasped. Clarissa's eyes filled with tears she couldn't allow to fall. "We're not patients," she whispered. "We're his study." Later that evening, Adelaide walked home alone. The city moved around her, busy, loud, alive, but she felt sealed inside a bubble of dread. Each step seemed heavier than the last, each breath tighter, each thought darker. Women disappearing, doctors keeping secret records, a treatment that never ends. A man who keeps his power by ensuring women can't leave. And suddenly, everything made sense. Her symptoms, her treatment, her progress, the locked ledger, the precise notes on her reactions, the way he monitored her breathing, her tension, her recovery. She wasn't being healed. She was being studied, managed, controlled, kept dependent on a system designed to benefit no one but the man holding the pen. And worst of all, every woman in that waiting room was living the same silent nightmare, some long enough to vanish entirely. As she reached her front door, her hand hovering over the brass handle, the full truth hit her with devastating clarity. Dr. Edmund Carter didn't treat hysteria. He manufactured it, sustained it, profited from it. And he wasn't working alone. Because no single doctor could have this much influence. No single clinic could hold this much power. No single man could hide this many vanished women. This was bigger, darker, older. A system, not a person. A system that needed silence to survive. And Adelaide, trembling on her doorstep, suddenly realized she was the only woman who'd seen too much and still walked out alive. For now. July 25th, 1887, the day resolve became dangerous. Adelaide woke with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. Not peace, nothing so gentle, but purpose. A heavy, solid purpose that anchored her even as fear curled quietly in her stomach. Clarissa's words haunted her. He never lets you leave his care. Women disappear. We're not patients. We're his study. Adelaide had spent the night replaying the last few weeks, picking apart every moment that had seemed strange, every detail she'd tried to ignore. The locked ledger, the precise notes, the way he dictated her treatment schedule without real consent, the way other women trembled in the waiting room, the way Eleanor's voice had cracked when she said something felt wrong. And now she understood why. She wasn't just trapped, she was monitored. Each week, she stepped willingly into the hands of a man who believed he owned her illness, and thus owned her. She needed to know what was written in that ledger. Not summaries, not assumptions. The truth. Because she suspected, now with terrifying certainty, that the real illness wasn't in her body. It was in that book. July 25th, 1887, 1:10 p.m., a plan takes shape. She spent the afternoon pacing her drawing room, the lace curtains pulled tightly shut. The clock ticked loudly, accusingly, marking each minute she wasted. Her appointment was in 3 days. She couldn't wait. She needed to read what he wrote before then. But how? There was only one way. She would have to get inside the clinic when he wasn't there. Impossible. Reckless. Unthinkable. And yet, it was the only way to know how deep this went. She moved to her writing desk and took out pen and paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she drafted a polite note. My dear Dr. Carter, I find I must reschedule Thursday's appointment due to a family obligation. Might I attend tomorrow morning instead? Respectfully, Mrs. A. Whitmore. It was risky. but she needed to catch him off guard. Tomorrow, not Thursday. Tomorrow meant he wouldn't have time to prepare. She folded the note, sealed it, and handed it to a young messenger boy waiting outside the post office. As he ran off, she whispered under her breath, "Let him say yes." He did. The reply arrived at dusk. "Mrs. Whitmore, tomorrow at 10 will be suitable. Do try to rest tonight." Dr. E. Carter. Rest. The word almost made her laugh. July 26, 1887, 9:50 a.m., the clinic hallway. She arrived earlier than usual, heart pounding beneath her bodice. The building was quiet. Too quiet. The street outside felt muted, the world dimmer. The waiting room was empty. Not a single patient, not a single servant. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Had he closed early? Had she misjudged her timing? Then she heard footsteps, deliberate, measured, approaching. Dr. Carter stepped out of his office, surprised but composed. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "you're early." "I couldn't sleep," she replied. "Understandable," he said, motioning her in. Troubled nerves often disturb the night. As she passed him, she caught a glimpse behind him. The office door, slightly ajar. The shelves, the desk, the ledger jutting out from beneath the pile of papers. Her heart hammered. This was her moment, but she needed him out of the room. She forced a faint, nervous smile. "Doctor, before we begin, might I trouble you for water? I feel rather faint." He studied her face, reading it the way he read everything, searching for symptoms, patterns, weakness. Then he nodded. "Of course. The pitcher is empty. I will fetch some from the kitchen. Sit. Breathe deeply." He stepped out of the office, leaving the door open. She counted to 3, then moved. Fast. Silent. With a desperation she didn't have the luxury to question. The ledger. Her fingers shook as she slid the heavy book from beneath the stack of folders. The brass clasp clicked softly when she opened it. The first page was familiar. Davenport, Clarissa, ongoing study. She turned the page. Her stomach turned. The notes weren't clinical. They were obsessive. Detailed descriptions of how long each woman remained tense, when her pulse quickened, whether she cried, whether she resisted, whether she returned willingly. And then she saw the most disturbing section. A list. A short list. A list of names crossed out. Beside each name, a word. Non-compliant, unresponsive, relocated, relocated. Her blood ran cold. Another page. Roberts, Annabelle, discontinued treatment. Husband informed of nervous collapse. Relocation arranged. Relocation. A lie. A cover. They weren't relocating to country houses. They were being removed. Why? Because they stopped responding? Because they pushed back? Because they broke the cycle? Her trembling fingers turned another page and found her own name. Whitmore, Adelaide, promising response. Duration increasing. Psychological compliance strong. Recommend sustained regimen. Not yet ready for release. Release, not recovery. Release, as if she belonged to him. As if she were property. As if her body's responses dictated her fate. Her breath hitched. Her head spun. He wasn't treating her. He was documenting her compliance. She was one unexpected reaction away from being crossed out in that ledger. Footsteps. Closer. She snapped the ledger shut, shoved it back under the papers, and slipped into the chair just as Dr. Carter walked in, carrying a glass. "Here," he said, offering it. "Drink." Her hands trembled as she took the glass. If he noticed, he didn't show it. But when he sat across from her, she caught something in his eyes, a flicker of suspicion. "Are you quite all right, Mrs. Brown?" Whitmore?" he asked. She forced a swallow. "I'm nervous today." He leaned forward, voice softening. "Then you must trust me even more than usual." Trust. She nearly laughed, but she couldn't break yet. Not here. Not in this small office where he held every advantage. As he began preparing for treatment, Adelaide made a decision so bold, so reckless, it terrified her even as it solidified inside her mind. She would never come back. Not willingly. Not ever. And if she wanted to survive, she needed to disappear before he realized she had seen too much. She needed to leave the clinic today as if nothing had changed. Or she might not leave at all. July 26, 1887, 11:42 a.m. The moment everything cracked, Adelaide lay on the examination table, her breath shallow, her heart hammering in her chest. She wasn't shaking from nerves this time. She was shaking from knowledge. Knowledge that changed everything. Dr. Carter moved through the room with his usual precision, adjusting lamps, aligning instruments, wiping surfaces. It was ritual to him, a performance he had perfected. But she wasn't watching his hands. She was watching his eyes, because now she recognized what lived behind them. It wasn't medical focus. It wasn't concern. It was ownership. And once she saw it, she could never unsee it. He stepped closer. "Relax, Mrs. Whitmore," he said softly. "You know the routine." Yes, she knew it too well. But today she wasn't here to be part of his routine. She was here to survive it. When he reached for the tray, she made her move. "Doctor?" Her voice cracked deliberately. "May I have a moment, just to steady myself?" He exhaled, impatient, irritated, but he nodded. He stepped back, and that was all she needed. She sat up, quickly. "Actually," she said, choosing every word with deadly care, "I think I may postpone today's session." Dr. Carter froze mid-movement. "Postpone," he repeated. "But you insisted on moving your appointment up." Her pulse jumped. "I'm feeling unwell. I prefer to rest." He stepped forward again, slower this time, controlled, calculated. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said quietly, "you are distressed. And distressed patients make poor decisions." He smiled, the kind of smile a hunter gives before the trap snaps shut. "Let me help you." She stood. "No." The word escaped before she could soften it. His expression didn't change. But something behind it shifted, a crack in the mask, cold and sharp. "You don't want to refuse treatment," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. "I've decided," she whispered. "I won't be returning." For the first time since she'd known him, Dr. Carter dropped the civil tone. "You misunderstand your condition. Without proper care, your symptoms will worsen. I'll risk that." "No," he said, stepping closer. "You won't." Her breath lodged in her throat. He knew. He knew she'd seen the ledger. And now he was calculating how to keep her compliant, or how to erase her as he had erased others. He moved closer still. "Sit down," he commanded. "We'll resume the session." Her blood turned to ice. But then, it happened. A sound in the hallway. Heavy footsteps, two voices, a knock. Then the door opened not for Dr. Carter, but for a man Adelaide had never seen. Tall, uniformed, calm. "Dr. Edmund Carter?" he asked. Carter blinked. "Recovering." "Yes. Who are you?" The man stepped inside, two constables behind him. "Inspector Hale, Metropolitan Police, we'd like to speak with you regarding 3 missing persons." Adelaide steadied herself, pulse roaring in her ears. 3 missing women. The names in the ledger. Her knees nearly buckled. Carter's voice stayed flat. "Inspector, this is a private medical clinic. If you wish to, we have a warrant," Hale said, producing the paper, "for a search of your premises." Something flickered across Carter's face. Fear, quickly strangled by arrogance. Hale turned to Adelaide gently. "Ma'am, are you here alone?" She swallowed. Hard. "Yes." "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered. "Not physically." He nodded once, reading far more than she said. "Constable Reed," Hale ordered, "please escort Mrs. Whitmore outside." Dr. Carter stepped forward sharply. "She is my patient." "Not anymore," Adelaide said quietly. For the first time, she saw the doctor's mask break completely, rage twisting through the cracks. But he couldn't touch her, not with the police watching. Constable Reed held the door for her. Adelaide stepped through it without looking back. Not once. Outside on the clinic steps, she finally breathed. The sky was bright, almost offensively cheerful. Life bustled, horses clattered, people moved. The world outside continued, as if the clinic behind her hadn't swallowed women for years, as if their suffering had been invisible, as if no one had ever thought to question it, until now. Inspector Hale approached her after several minutes, hat in hand. "Mrs. Whitmore?" he said. "I won't ask for details you're not ready to give, but I need to know. How long were you under his care?" "4 weeks," she said. He let out a slow breath. "You're fortunate." The words struck like ice. She closed her eyes. She didn't feel fortunate. She felt hollow, but she was alive. And that mattered, more than she could understand yet. August 12, 1887. 2 weeks later, London moved on. It always did. New scandals replaced the old. New silhouettes filled drawing rooms. New gossip rippled across parlors and teas. But Adelaide was not the same. She hadn't been back to the clinic. Not for treatment. Not for answers. Not even for closure. She didn't need closure. She needed truth. And truth came in the morning paper. Private physician arrested in connection with missing women. Ledger confiscated. Her hands trembled as she read the article. Dozens of patient names. Notes described as highly irregular. Evidence of misconduct. Questions of consent. Whispers of women who relocated mysteriously after resisting treatment. No one printed the full truth. Victorian London wasn't ready to call abuse by its name. But between the lines, Adelaide could see the horror the city didn't dare speak. Inspector Hale had written one sentence that struck her hardest. The greatest danger was not what he did in secret, but what he did openly, under the shield of science. She folded the paper slowly. And for the first time since she'd entered Dr. Edmund Carter's clinic, she felt something that resembled strength. Not safety, not peace, but strength. Because now she understood, it wasn't her body that had been broken. It was the system surrounding it. A system that declared women fragile, then treated them like experiments. A system that denied female suffering, then blamed them for feeling it. A system that praised men like Carter and silenced women like the ones in his ledger. But not anymore. Not for her. That evening, she lit a single lamp on her writing desk, and for the first time, she wrote, "They call it hysteria, but it was never our bodies that were sick. It was their power." She didn't know if she would publish it. She didn't know if anyone would listen. But she knew this. She would never again sit quietly while someone else named her pain. And for Victorian London, that was rebellion enough.